In a matinee matchup against the Islanders, the Devils decided to go out for brunch. And as a result, they got shut out for the 8th time this season. And now they're on a 3-game losing streak. On the bright side, they're still going to the playoffs. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, College Hockey Play announcer, Devils Wire Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time Credential Me member, Trey Matthews. For the 8th time this season, the New Jersey Devils have been shut out. They lost to New York Islanders by a score of 1-0. If you're curious, the Devils are third in the NHL for most times being shut out. Ahead of them are the Predators with 10 and the Blue Jackets with 9. To add insult to injury, they're currently on a 3-game losing streak. As we all know, they clinched a playoff position last week thanks to the Flyers beating the Rangers, but there hasn't been much to celebrate for the time being, just because it's hard to get excited that the Devils are losing, but at the same time they're going to the playoffs. I think everyone's a little conflicted, if you would. If you're watching on YouTube, I now have a clean shave. I'm preparing myself for playoffs. I got to grow out the playoff beard, but I want to get excited for Devils hockey, but it's games like this where it's just like, what's there to cheer for? Because with all due respect, this game was aired on national television. TNT had the call. Not really all that eventful. It was a boring game with the exception of one big incident in the second period. What's on the agenda for today's episode? In the first segment, I will share my main takeaways from the game. Then in the second segment, we will hear from head coach Sheldon Keefe. Don't look now, but there are only 2 regular season games remaining on the docket. The Devils have to play the Hurricanes in the first round of the playoffs, which begin April 19th. So things are starting to move a lot faster. And then in the third and final segment, like I do with every post-game episode recap, I will compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade. Okay, I said that this game was somewhat boring, and I think part of the reason why is just because both these teams aren't really playing for anything. For the Devils, they've already locked up a position in the playoffs. They're the 3rd seed. It's set in stone. They're going to play the Hurricanes. They can't move up. They can't move down. They don't have home ice advantage. They stay where they're at. Whereas for the Islanders, they're mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. A little hard for them to be motivated, with all due respect. And based on the age of the roster as well, they're in a unique situation. They still got Sorokin, but a lot of other question marks. Stefan Noesen did not play in this game due to rest. We're going to see that throughout the next few games where Sheldon Keefe will give some guys a breather in preparation for the playoffs. You need someone like Stefan Noesen with his energy, his net front presence, how he's used on the power play. I know it's been somewhat of a struggle to close out the season for Stefan Noesen, but he is so vital for the Devils roster. Paul Cotter might also get a breather for the Devils in the not-so-distant future, but I don't think it's by choice. We'll talk about that momentarily. Focusing on the opening frame, I felt as though the Devils came out with a lot of energy in the first period. It seemed like they were full of vigor. Jacob Markstrom, he was strong in between the pipes. Devils didn't score in that first period, obviously. In fact, they didn't score throughout the course of the game. That's been the story all season long. Doesn't matter if the Devils get off to a fast start or a slow start. the first period is not usually their best period. And I felt as though they caught a major break when Bo Horvat's goal was initially waved off at one point in the first period. The referees called it quick. They said no goal instantly. Jacob Markstrom, he was also pleading his case. Apparently, the puck went a little too high on his stick, and they felt as though he sort of pushed it in. They looked at the replay monitor just to confirm it. I was thinking, okay, Devils caught a break. Let's see what they could do in the second period. Well, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the second period, but it's not for good reasons. Let's talk about the Paul Cotter incident, and I will share my thoughts on the matter. At one point in the second, Cotter's shoulder made contact with Adam Pelech's face, and Pelech instantly fell to the ground. He was bleeding from his nose. He slammed his helmet in frustration. He was yelling all sorts of expletives toward Cotter. Now, Cotter did try to apologize. He said it was an accident, but people like Tony DeAngelo weren't having it. They were trying to get Cotter away from Pelech, and rightfully so. I understand why Pelech is a little ticked off. According to the TNT broadcast, he's dealt with head injuries before, and head injuries are no joke. Your second head injury is always worse than your first one, and your third one is always worse than your second one. I can get the frustration. He went down the tunnel, leaving a trail of blood, and Cotter was given a game misconduct, so he hit the showers early. A lot of people have their opinions as to how Cotter could have went about it, but I think Paul Bissonnette and company really broke it down well during the intermission, which is first and foremost, there was no ill intent by Cotter. He instantly went over to apologize to Pelech, but obviously Pelech was frustrated. I'm not really going to get on him for that. But Paul Bissonnette basically said, like, everything is in fast motion. And sometimes when you have to make a split second decision, it sometimes doesn't really go all that well. And if you look at the replay, you can clearly see that Pelech is playing the puck. As soon as it left his stick, Cotter was very close to him. And I think Cotter was also trying to avoid Pelech's stick. And ultimately, his shoulder made contact with his face. Bissonnette also brought up the point saying that if Cotter were to maneuver his shoulder or twist his body in any which sort of way to avoid Pelech at all costs, he would sort of have to do like a flamenco dance move. For anyone who doesn't know, you might know the flamenco signature ole. I hope I'm doing that correctly, but that's what basically Bissonnette and the entire TNT crew were breaking down, and I do agree with them. We have the luxury of looking back at everything via replay. And I feel as though sometimes replay can make things worse than they appear. And I think in this sort of circumstance, it definitely holds true to that. I don't think Cotter meant anything by it. He's not a dirty player. Yes, he does lay a lot of hits, but I don't think there's been a time this season in which he's been given a game misconduct. So he pays the piper. He's going to have a hearing with the NHL. So a suspension might be pending. I hope Pelech is all right. Wish him the best. Obviously, head injuries are no joke, but similar to what the TNT crew said, I don't think Cotter meant anything by it. You live, you learn, move on. That's my stance on the matter. Looked at it 10 times, but let me know your thoughts on the matter. Toward the end of the second period, I thought it was going to be similar to the first, where no team is able to crack into the scoring column, but Timo Meier made a mistake. I've been high on Timo Meier throughout the month of March and also parts of April. He's really elevated his game, but he had a costly turnover that ended up being the only goal scored in the game. He was in the Devils' defensive end. He tried to pass the puck, and Bo Horvat pit-pocketed him. He was able to swipe the puck, and he scored unassisted. Now, Sheldon Keefe did call a timeout. I think he was trying to look at the replay to see if maybe the Islanders were offsides, but to no avail. And that actually ended up to bite the Devils later on, because in the third period, Devils couldn't generate anything. The Islanders did a good job of keeping them on the perimeter. And as the third period waned on, the Devils couldn't get anything on Sorokin. And now, late in the third period, you got to pull Jacob Markstrom from the game to get the extra attacker, but you can't because you don't have a timeout. So Markstrom wasn't taken off the ice until there was about 25 seconds remaining in the game, and it was too little, too late. Devils ended up losing 1-0. Disappointing outcome. I know a lot of people are frustrated. There might be a silver lining here. I'm still waiting for the Devils to pick up a win before the end of the season and celebrate when the vibes are at an all-time high going to the playoffs. But they have now dropped 3 straight games to 3 teams that are not going to the playoffs. A little disappointing if you ask me. All right, we're going to hear from Sheldon Keefe momentarily, but before we continue, let me tell you guys about Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives business flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Okay, let's listen into what head coach Sheldon Keefe had to say post-game. Take a listen.
What did you kind of see? Because one goal gets behind your goaltender, fluky kind of or just a situation in front of the net. How do you sort of evaluate this process?
Yeah, I really liked our start, and I'd say I liked our finish. Probably like the 30 minutes in between there, like the last 10 minutes of the first, pretty much the whole second period. I'd say probably 40 of the 60. I'd say we just weren't good enough for me, just in terms of offense. I mean, defensively we were good, didn't give up much. Markey was really good. So those are positives, of course. And as you say, we make one pretty big mistake. That's the difference in the game ultimately. But I just didn't think we had enough offensively. Aside from we had a surge at the start of the game, which you love to see. You want to get to a good start. It's 2 games in a row now. I've really liked how we've come out and started the game. And then I like the surge at the end. I thought, we probably should have had one if we can execute a little bit better and hit the net a little more. But, all in all, it's a pretty sleepy game.
Do you think that it's because of where we are at in the season and just what's ahead?
I'm gonna believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Only because you know what, I look around the league and any of the teams in the same situation as us, unless their coaches speaking, they're saying the same things. They want to get on with this. So it's kind of the way it is. You got to finish the schedule. It's an 82-game schedule. I'm really excited for us to get on the road. We've been at home way too much. It's not normal. We've been 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks here straight at home. I think everybody, we need to get away, get back into a regular sort of NHL routine, and we'll go on the road tomorrow. Looking forward to playing on the road. We'll take the positive things out of this game, but also the things that we know we need to do a better job of. We chatted a bunch about that in the second intermission. Just offensively, we're just not making enough plays. Like we're just shooting the shin pads or just keeping the puck on the wall. Like, there's no offense there, so we've got to do a better job of that. Which is why I like the start of the first and the end of the third. I thought we did a much better job, and that's what we need more of.
Okay, a few takeaways from that soundbite. Playing at home too much? I honestly thought playing at home would be good for the Devils. I thought it would be beneficial just because you're playing in front of a home crowd. You get to sleep in your own bed. You don't have to deal with travel. I am a former athlete myself, and I always preferred playing at home compared to playing on the road, because after a home game, you get to just go straight to your own place. You don't have to like get on a bus. You don't have to like settle in at a hotel. You don't have to like go through travel, the airport, things like that. But obviously, I'm not in the NHL, so I can't really speak on that matter. Maybe they are just trying to get into a routine. I felt as though sometimes the Devils playing all these back-to-backs or road games, especially earlier in the year, was not good for them. Remember, they started their season off in Europe, and I think it kind of caught up to them, and it took them a minute to really get their legs underneath them. But I'm not really going to go into more detail than that. That just kind of surprised me a little bit. I thought playing in front of your home fans, especially not having to deal with the logistics of traveling. But I think one thing that everyone can agree with is that everyone wants home ice advantage come playoff time. I don't think any team would say no otherwise. Just saying. So I disagree with Sheldon Keefe on that aspect. Now, playing sleepy. I get that a lot of people are frustrated with the Devils' last few games. And honestly, I'm also frustrated because the Devils really need to get their act together because the playoffs are right around the corner. You don't really have much time to be dropping games and just hoping for a miraculous turnaround. You need to build some momentum. You need to build consistency. Similar to what I said in the first segment, you will see some players take some time off just to get their minds and their bodies right. But the fact that the Devils have lost 3 straight games to 3 non-playoff teams, I'm not going to say that I'm concerned, but I kind of expect just a little better. And it's been a minute since they've scored a goal. Now, play-by-play announcer Bill Spalding decided to put things into a different perspective. He said, to give some concrete numbers to this, the 3 Metro teams who've basically been locked into their seating the last couple weeks have all had to deal with playing a little lackadaisical, for lack of a better term. The Capitals are 3-6-1 in their last 10. Carolina, they're 1-4-1 in their last 6. Devils are 3-3 in their last 6. Somebody responded to Bill Spalding and saying that they don't care about the other team's results. They just care about the Devils. Bill chimed in and he said, from March 9th through clinching a playoff spot and being locked into their seeding, the Devils were 8-5-1, 8-4-1 through the Ranger game. Unusual situation to be locked into seeding so early, natural to look ahead. I don't know how everyone else feels, but to piggyback off what Bill said, I do agree with them. Like I said in the first segment, the Devils are locked into number 3 in the Metro. They can't move up. They can't move down. It's kind of hard to find that sort of motivation because no matter what happens, they're still going to the playoffs. That's not an issue. Eric Holla said post-game that the Islanders did a good job of keeping the Devils outside, not letting them get near Sorokin. He also said that the Hurricanes like to play a similar style, so they got to take the mistakes that they made against the Islanders and utilize it to prepare for the Hurricanes. I think that's another way to look at it, which is I would rather the Devils have these sort of bumps and kinks to close out the regular season compared to the playoffs and possibly get off to a slow start. Use the lessons that you've learned these past few games to clean up your game a little bit more. The playoffs are obviously a different animal. We'll see what happens. The Hurricanes, they're certainly not a perfect team, but the one thing I do know about them, they like to play physical. And the Devils got to be prepared for that. I know a lot of people are disappointed, but just putting it into a different perspective, similar to what Bill Spalding said, you can look at things differently and just say, Devils are locked in. Maybe they're not as motivated as they were a couple weeks ago. Sheldon Keefe talked about it as well. I think a few of the other players also talked about it. But that game against the Bruins, that's inexcusable. You got to perform a lot better than that. All right. We're going to compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade momentarily. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about wonderful pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller all day long. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's a perfect grab and go snack for busy days. I'm constantly on the road. Get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, let's compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade, and get out of here. Aside from the Cotter Pelech issue in the second and also the Timo Meier blunder, it wasn't really that eventful of a game. I was a little disappointed. It was a matinee matchup, but the Devils went out to brunch, like I said in the cold open. Shots on goal differential, 25-22 in favor of the Devils. Power plays, Devils were 0 for 1. Islanders were 0 for 3. Hey, there's a positive right there. The Devils still doing well on the PK. Hits, 27-19 in favor of the Islanders. Giveaways, 23-31 in favor of the Islanders. Takeaways, 3-2 in favor of the Islanders. Blocked shots, 22-9 in favor of the Islanders. This goes back to what Eric Haula alluded to during his post-game media availability, just keeping the Devils on the perimeter. That's what the Islanders did, and they did a good job of doing so and protecting their goalie. Time spent in penalty box, 19-2 in favor of the Devils. Keep in mind, Cotter did get a match penalty in the second, so it was a lengthy penalty kill for the Devils that time around. But they did a good job of killing it off. All right. If I had to give the Devils a letter grade, see, for these types of games, I would normally just give them a B or a B minus. It wasn't really that bad of an outing. They made one blunder that came back to bite them. It was a good effort. They just fell short, but I'm going to have to ding them points because they're on a 3-game losing skid, and I know they're capable of much better, especially against an Islanders team that was mathematically eliminated from playoff contention not too long ago. In fact, just a few days ago when this episode goes live. So I'm going to give the Devils a solid C. Wasn't the best game, wasn't the worst game. Let's not overreact. Devils are still going to the playoffs. Look at it like that. That's still an improvement from last year. I'm going to keep repeating that. But let me know your thoughts. What did you think of the Paul Cotter and Adam Pelech situation in the second period? What are some of your thoughts on the Sheldon Keefe media availability? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.